Okay, good evening, everyone. Back to giving share over Zoom, hopefully only temporarily. I just said I've posted on the chat function the handout for those who didn't manage to get it earlier, and I'll see how long my voice holds out for this year. So apologies if I cut it a little short this week. So I as per the source sheet, I really just wanted to learn the first few psukim of the Sedra, around which there's much discussion. Some of it may be familiar to you, some of it's hopefully a little new. And the basic concept or context is that the psukim, as they read, don't seem to flow. They don't seem to make much sense. It's difficult to understand what's really going on. The way I printed it, for better or for worse, I'm not sure it was the clearest format, is I printed in standard size the psukim, and then I interwove Rashi in italics in between. But we're going to just learn some psukim together, and then we'll look at how Rashi addresses the problem and how some of the other commentaries deal with it. So let's learn. So Pasuk Aleph, and again for those who have just joined, I've loaded again the. Let's put again the link to the handout. Pasuk Aleph says as follows: VaYera Elof Hashem be'elonu Mamre. Hashem appeared to him. This is to Avraham. In the it's translated in the terebinths of Mamre. The word elonu means perhaps the a tree grove, or perhaps it means plains of some sort. Hashem appeared where Avraham was living at the time in the elonu Mamre. V'hu yoshev pesach ha'ol k'chom hayom. And Avraham was sitting at the tent door in the heat of day. So there's a number of questions that spring to mind as soon as we learn this pasuk. First of all, this language of VaYera Elof Hashem is very unusual terminology. I mean, we find many prophetic experiences. Normally they're Vaydabar Hashem Elov, Vayom Hashem Elov. Occasionally they're described as the dream. VaYera Elof Hashem, Hashem appeared to him, is a little unusual language. Secondly, why the location is given is of interest. Thirdly, why is it telling us that Avraham sitting at the tent? And fourthly, why is it telling us it's in the heat of the day? So if one had to highlight it in one's hands, and one wanted to highlight with the words that were interesting in this pasuk, and around which one raised questions, I think one would end up highlighting every word in this pasuk. Every word in this pasuk is of interest and difficulty to understand. Either way, Vayisra Einov, Avraham lifted his eyes. We're now going four boxes down on the table, 4 rows down on the table. Vayisra Einov Vayah, Avraham lifted his eyes and he saw, V'nei shlosha anoshim nitzavim olav, 3 men are standing over him. It's also a little unusual language, nitzavim olav, standing over him. Vayah it's across him, he saw and he ran to greet them. Pasach ha'ol, from the entrance to the tent. Vayshlach and bowed down to the earth. And again, this pasuk is interesting. Whether if they were standing over him, why did he have to run to greet them? And also what's interesting is that he runs to greet them. I mean, we're just told that Hashem has appeared to him. Hashem doesn't seem to say anything to him when he appears, and Avraham seems to rather abruptly leave to greet these guests. And then if we carry on the psukim, Vayomer, Avraham said, Pasuk Gimel, so this is the second last row on the page. Vayomer, and the next word is not clear how to pronounce. It's the name of Adoi Noi. It sounds like the name of Hashem. Either it means Hashem or it means my master. If I found favor in your eyes, don't pass by. But what should you do? The pasuk can carry on. Pasuk Dalet, the second row on page 2. Take a little bit of water and wash your feet. Vishonu tachas 8, and rest under the tree. And so carries on the stories of Avram's welcome to his guests. In Pasuk 10, Pasuk Yud, the guest said, I will return to you this time next year, and to Sarah will be born a son, from which we seem to understand that these guests are not normal guests. If they say they will return in a year's time and bring a son, who are they? What sort of guests are these? And if we then carry on the psukim, we've got the famous episode of Pasuk Yud Beis, Sarah laughing, she rejects the prophecy. Pasuk Yud Gimel, to be now near the end of page 2. Pasuk 13, suddenly Hashem reappears. And Hashem says to Avraham, why is Sarah laughing? Is it impossible for Hashem to do anything? Pasuk 14. Then Pasuk 16, Vayakumu misham hanoshim, the men get up. Vayashkif al pnei Saddam, they look over Saddam. Pasuk 17, Hashem says, should I hide from Avraham what I'm planning to do? Surely Avraham will become a great nation. Pasuk 20, Hashem says that the cry of Saddam has risen up. I'm going to destroy it. And then Pasuk 22, top of page 3, Vayifnu misham hanoshim, vayolchu, the men leave. Pasuk 23, the last box on the last row on the table on page 3, Vayigash Avraham vayomer ha'aftis b'tzadik in Rasha, the opening lines of the famous arguments between Hashem and Avraham, in which Hashem accuses Avraham of davening unjustly. So what we have here, and we miss this often, is a complete interweaving of conversations going on. Hashem appears to Avraham. Avraham runs out and sees the guests and runs out and greets them. He gives welcome and hospitality to the guests. Then he says, presumably the guest, but we're not sure, I am going to give you a son. Which guest is entitled to speak that way and say, I will give you a son? Sarah laughs. Suddenly Hashem speaks, not one of the guests, and says, why is Sarah laughing? And there's a conversation around that. Then Hashem says, the men get up. We're back to the guests. They get up, and it sounds like they're about to leave. Then Hashem begins speaking again and says, I'm planning to destroy Saddam. Then the men leave, and then Hashem carries on, and Avraham addresses Hashem and says, I don't understand this decision to destroy the stone. How can a righteous judge do injustice? So the psukim are very, very difficult and problematic, very, very difficult to understand what on earth are going on in these psukim. What is this interweaving of Hashem and the guests? Now, we often miss this difficulty because we learn Chumash with Rashi hand in hand, and we rarely step back to have a look at what the psukim would mean to us were we not to have Rashi helpfully by our side. And because we don't do that, we often miss how innovative, how mechudash, how the chiddush, the insight and innovation of Rashi's reading, and the fact that were it not for Rashi, we could have well read the psukim differently, and equally how other Mefarshim read the psukim. And there's a range of ways of understanding this. We often notice that the pshat of the psukim is so difficult because Rashi sort of leads us through how he understands this. Now, Rashi is the Av HaMefarshim, he's the father of all commentaries. He is the one whom, over the last, since Rashi came out, the last several hundred years, has become the standard commentary. And therefore, obviously, we're going to start with Rashi, but equally, hopefully, see how innovative Rashi's reading is and how other Mefarshim understand it. So Rashi, let's have a start with Rashi. And Rashi begins on, if we go back to page 1, to the first psukim, VaYera lo Hashem. VaYera lo Hashem. Sorry, Hashem appeared to him. So Rashi picks up on this strange language. Hashem appears to him, and perhaps Rashi is also aware and conscious that actually Hashem doesn't say anything. He appears but doesn't say anything till Avraham goes out to greet the guest. So what is the point of the appearance of Hashem? Why is it mentioned that he's in Elodei Mamre? Why is it mentioned that this is Kachom Hayom? Why is it mentioned that he is sitting at the entrance of his tent? Rashi answers all these questions by saying Avraham is post Bris Milah. He's post the Brit Milah. Last week, Cedric just described him having his circumcision. He is now recovering. This is the continuation of the story. And Hashem is coming to Bikkur Cholim. And therefore, normally Hashem, when he arrives to deliver a particular message, to teach or tell something or communicate something. This is just a visit for visit's sake as Bikkur Cholim. And then he carries on. Avraham is sitting at the entrance of the tent because he wants to do Hachnos Arachim. He's longing to have guests. However, the sun is shining strong. It's Kachom Hayom because Hashem brings out the sun in order to avoid guests disturbing Avraham, perhaps also to bring the healing rays of sun to Avraham, to bring him healing. And Avraham is desperate for guests. Then Pasuk Gimel, Pasuk 2. the fourth row on the table, Avraham lifts up his eyes and he sees three people. Who are these three people? So again, the pasuk doesn't make it clear. Rashi says these three people are angels. They're malachim. How do we know they're malachim? Because later on in the Parsha, we find them doing a number of missions. They tell Avraham that he's going to have a child, Yitzhak, and they say, I will come back, I will visit you, and you will have a child, a guest. Even if they want to be nice to the host and make a prediction that you'll have a child, this isn't what they say. They say, we will. And Hashem actually is upset with Sarah for laughing at this. So clearly these are angels, these are malachim who have come. In addition, we find that 2 out of 3 then go on and do the mission of rescuing Lot from Saddam and destroying Saddam. And therefore we understand these are angelic forces, messengers of Hashem. Then Rashi says there's another textual nuance that indicates this strange language of the guests standing over Avraham. They don't stand over Avraham, they stand in front of Avraham, lefonov. Why do they say over Avraham, olov? Because they're angels, angels stand over Avraham. And then Rashi comments, why is it that Avraham goes dashing off? Because Avraham sees the guests and he leaves Hashem, with whom he's in the middle of a prophetic encounter. He recognizes and understands and realizes that they need to be hosted, and therefore he runs out to greet them. We've discussed in this forum before, I'm not going to go into it now, but if you look underneath the table in the middle of page 2, I've quoted page 3, the table in the middle of page 3, I've quoted a very famous Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Chaf Zayin Omid Aleph. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, says Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, greater is receiving guests than even receiving the divine. In other words, Avraham left Hashem to go and welcome, he didn't know it at the time, but these figures who are angels. How could he leave God? He's in the middle of a prophetic experience. Hashem has come to visit him to welcome the angels. It must be that it is better to welcome guests than to engage in a prophetic experience. I find this a wonderful and inspiring idea. We may long for the divine in our lives. We may long for spiritual connection. Perhaps we wish we had the spiritual clarity of prophecy. Chazal are telling us, reading into this pasuk, that there's a greater closeness to the divine through welcoming in guests than there is through prophecy. So we can all be closer to Hashem than a prophet. What a wonderful insight, what an amazing and wonderful idea. If we wish to be as close as possible to Hashem, we may think that is the level of Nevuah. No, say Chazal, there's a way of being closer to Hashem than that, a closeness to Hashem of remarkable connection by welcoming into our house 3 dusty strangers, pagans, idol worshippers, unknown figures of no particular worth, seemingly, or quality, and nonetheless welcoming into our home is a greater closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of greater worth. So you see Chazal. And now we get to the really interesting pasuk, pasuk Gimel, pasuk 3, at the bottom of page 1. Vayomer, Avraham said, and now the next word is unclear. Is this Hashem, Adoi and Enoi, referring to Hashem? And he's speaking to Hashem. And this is one possibility, Rashi suggests, the second option. He's speaking to Hashem, and he's saying to Hashem, I'm making my excuses. Hashem, if I find favor in your eyes, please don't leave me. I'm rushing off to welcome guests, but please stay here. Please don't depart. Just because I'm doing a mitzvah, I don't want to lose you. I'm going to go and welcome the guests. Give me a few hours and come back where you have been patiently waiting, and then I will continue my prophetic encounter with you. So he's speaking to Hashem. The alternative reading is, this name is a secular name. Adonai doesn't mean Hashem, it means my master. And now if I can say this reading, I'm allowed to pronounce the word. It's referring to my master. And it's Avraham addressing the senior of the 3 guests, the one who is clearly their leader. And he's saying to them, please don't pass by. If I found favor in your eyes, please stop by my tent so that I can offer you hospitality. Now we will see near the end, Reb Samson Raphael Hirsch analyzes the pasuk, and he points out that there are 2 difficulties with this latter reading. First of all, normally when you refer to a human master, you don't say Adonai, you don't say that pronunciation. You say Adonai or Adoni, my master. You wouldn't normally refer to it as with Adonai. Normally that phrase is used just for the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just for the name of Hashem. So this is one textual difficulty. The second one is he is speaking to all three seemingly. So why does he speak in the singular? Why does he only address one of them? And Rashi's answer is he's addressing the senior one. But be that as it may, it's a little bit difficult in the simple reading of the pasuk. However, the fact is, in Chazal, there are two ways of interpreting these pasukim. Either it is referring to Hashem, and he's asking Hashem to stay around, or he's asking the human visitor, my master, please come and visit me. Either way, if he's in the middle of a prophetic revelation, we understand the continuation of the pasukim. We understand in pasuk 10 that the malach says, I will return and you will have a child. It's an angel speaking. An angel is entitled to deliver a message on behalf of Hashem. We also understand why suddenly Hashem appears in the story in pasuk 13 at the bottom of page 2. In pasuk 17, Hashem is speaking and he says to Avraham, why is Sarah laughing? And then as the pasukim go on, in pasuk 19, 20, 21, 23, Hashem speaks to Avraham and says, I'm going to destroy Saddam, etc. Why is Hashem speaking? Why is this interwoven in the story of the Malachim? Because actually there's two stories going on at the same time in parallel. Avraham on the one hand is in the middle of Hashem, speaking to Hashem. Hashem is hanging around his tent the whole time that he's doing Hachos Tzorchim, and therefore there's this constant sort of flipping backwards and forwards in the story. Sometimes Avraham is busy with the guests, and sometimes he pops in to say hello to Hashem. It's a remarkable reading of the Psukim in which Hashem is hanging around and Avraham is popping in and out, going out to sort out the guests, then speaking to Hashem, then going back, multitasking really. So when you have two lots of guests in your house and you're trying to make them all feel comfortable, but neither one is able to sit with the other one, Hashem is there, Hashem speaking to Avraham speaking to Hashem, going back to Malachim, giving them food, going back to Hashem. And this is how Rashi reads the Psukim, an incredible reading of the Psukim according to Rashi. I've somewhat oversimplified Rashi. I've put in the source sheet the translation of Rashi, but this is more or less Rashi's reading of the Psukim. Someone wrote here, I was once told a practical ramification of all of this. If you have guests, you can't need them to go to shul, even if the shul needs you for a minyan or you need to say Kaddish, unless of course they don't mind, they're happy to go with you. So if you're happy for me to say this b'shem Omro, give me a little nod. Yeah, this was David who posted this. I mean, this is right. If your guests will be uncomfortable, but this is perhaps connected with also the sugya of osek b'mitzvah, patur min ha-mitzvah. If one is engaged in a mitzvah, one is exempt from other mitzvahs. It's a little more complicated, the how one works out the sort of halachic algorithm of precedence. But it's certainly true that if your guests would be uncomfortable due to you leaving them, then this may well get priority. So this is Rashi's reading of the Psukim. Now I printed at the middle of page 3 a Chizkuni. Chizkuni is I think it's called a super commentary, a commentary on a commentary. He was a Rishon, so we're talking about a medieval commentary, but he generally expands upon Rashi's explanations, and he explains how we're meant to understand Rashi, and he adds in these 2 points. He says, why did Avraham appear to Hashem according to Rashi? He says Rashi explains because to visit Avraham. What's Rashi's source? He says Rashi's source is because the pasuk doesn't say anything about what Hashem says. It just says Hashem appeared. Very unusual language. Let's read the Chizkuni inside. VaYera, Hashem appeared. It was the third day of Avraham's meal. This is in the middle of page 3. Hashem came v'shalbo to inquire to Avraham how he is feeling. What's the mashmos? What's the implication? Where did this midrashic reading come from? We never find prophecy described as he appeared. Where there's no speaking that happens after Odibur. So it doesn't say anywhere that Hashem then spoke. And therefore he says, what reason would he have appeared to him if not to visit him? And then his other explanation is, actually Hashem did appear to him for a purpose, a reason. He wanted to tell him about Saddam, which is the end of the chapter. However, the story became interrupted because of the Malachim, and therefore Hashem never got round to his original intention because it was delayed. So in the second reading of Psukim, this was a normal prophecy. Hashem appeared, and then he was going to speak. But before he had a chance to speak, the angels turned up. We have the whole visitor story, and Avraham feeding them and looking after them. Then at the end of the chapter, we get back to the original purpose of this prophecy, which is the announcement of the destruction of Saddam. So this is the second explanation that Chizkuni gives. This is the second line of the Chizkuni on page 3. V'yeshomim, others say, Ikama shenisra Kadosh Baruch Hu Avraham, the main reason of Hashem appeared to Avraham, lo haya ela l'tzorich ma'aseh Saddam, was in order to let him know about the story of Saddam. Aval ma'aseh malachim hifsik inyan, the guests, the angels arriving interrupted the story. So says the Chizkuni. Now the truth is, this is also interesting, because if these guests were random guests, I understand why their timing ended up so unfortunate. Hashem appears to speak to Avraham, and unfortunately, before he gets a chance to speak, the guests turn up. So Avraham has no choice but to say to Hashem, hold off, let me bring in the guests, and then we'll carry on. If these guests are malachim, they're the angels of Hashem. So it's remarkable that Hashem coordinates or choreographs things such that the guests he sends Avraham happen to interrupt Avraham mid-prophecy, such that he's unable to say his communication, has to hang around waiting for Avraham to do Achmas, and only then deliver his message. So we'll file away that thought as a little bit of a question on this reading, which is, it's a little bit of a coincidence that the guests turn up just when Avraham is about to have his nevuah, and therefore the nevuah, the prophecy, has to be held off till the guests turn up. Very, very interesting. Okay, what I want to do in the remaining time is two things. I want to look at several very different readings of the Pesukim, number one. And number two, I want to conclude with a phenomenal and beautiful thought from Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch. But first of all, let's look at the alternative readings of the Pasuk. And the first reading I want to look at on the bottom half of page 3 comes from the Rashbam. The Rashbam was the grandson of Rashi. He was a prominent Baal Tosfos, and both in his Tosfos, his additional commentaries on the Gemara, on the Talmud, and in his Perush, his commentary on the Torah, he is unafraid of picking a fight with his grandfather and arguing with Rashi's reading of Pesukim. And he also is a Baal Hapshat. Now, I was talking to someone actually about this today. Rashi tells us again and again, what I'm explaining to you is Pshuto Shal Mikra, is the simplest reading of the Pasuk. Now, when we read Rashi, it's full of midrashic readings, and this is an example of this very midrashic reading of the Pesukim. Nonetheless, Rashi calls this a pshat. The Rashbam criticizes Rashi, and he says, no, Rashi has gone too midrashic. What I am going to say will be pshat. Now, what are we meant to make of this? I mean, is Rashi pshat or isn't he pshat? And how is there an argument over what pshat is? And the answer is that what is called the simplest or plainest reading of a pasuk, or any text, really depends on your assumptions about the text, what sort of text it is. If you read a technical manual, perhaps an instruction manual about how to operate a piece of software or hardware, you will read it with a different set of assumptions about how it works, in contrast if you read, literature, a book or a poem. And therefore, the simplest reading that you ascribe to one text will be very different to the simplest reading that you ascribe to another text. And if you learn the textual manual, the technical manual with a chavrusa, and your chavrusa says to you, when the technical manual says, turn off the switch or you will be in danger, I think that is a metaphor for making a switch and an alteration in your life. And if you don't make changes in your life, then you'll be in spiritual and well-being danger. You would tell the guy this is a ridiculous reading of the text. That's not pshat. That's not the plain meaning of the text, because that's not how technical manuals work. In other words, you have a certain set of assumptions about how this text should work, and you're unwilling to tolerate this reading. If you then read some Shakespeare and you suggest a metaphorical reading, or an idea in a poem in which symbolism is being used, and you say that to your chavrusa, you will say this is pshat. And if your chavrusa then turns and says you are a hypocrite, last week I suggested a metaphorical reading in a text, and he said this is nonsense. And this week you're also suggesting a metaphorical reading. You will respond, these are two different types of texts. So what's going on over here in between Rashi and the Rashbam and the Ibn Ezra and others is a debate really about what sort of text the Torah is and how it should be read. Now the Torah is multi-tiered. It's read on many dimensions, many levels, and we've discussed this in the past. But one of the ways to read it is Peshat. And even in the realm of Peshat, Rashi, the Rashbam, the Ibn Ezra argue over what is the plain or simple meaning of the text. Be that as it may, the Rashbam offers a very different reading of the text. And the Rashbam says, VaYera of Hashem means Hashem appeared to him. God appears to Avraham. No doubt. This is an appearance of Hashem, appearing in front of God. God's appearing in front of Avraham. What is the revelation, the appearance of Hashem in front of Avraham? It is the Malach who appears in front of Avraham. The three visitors are angels. Angels are messengers of Hashem. They carry Hashem, the presence and the word of Hashem within them. Meaning to say, they convey and they bring to us human beings spiritual awareness of the presence of Hashem. And therefore, where does Hashem appear to Avraham? How does Hashem appear to Avraham? Through the experience of him lifting up his eyes and seeing these three messengers coming to speak to him. Let's learn and read Rashbam just very briefly inside. This is halfway down page, a third of the way from the bottom of page 3. Rashbam. VaYera of Hashem. Hashem appears to Avraham. Heyach. Where did Hashem appear to Avraham? Answers Rashbam. The three men come in front of him who are the Malachim. And then he says, Shahaba Makomos, many times, Shenira Malach, when an angel appears to someone, Karo B'Lashon Shechina, it's referred to as if Hashem is appearing to the person, because as the Pasuk says, because my name is in him, Shaluchai Kamosoi. He now sort of quotes a halachic line. We say Shliach Shel Adam Kamosoi, the agent of a person is like themselves, meaning an agent in halacha can affect a transaction for you. Similarly, Hashem has Shlichim, he has messengers who are in some way or other able to be referred to as the presence of Hashem himself. If we look, for example, in this reading at Pasuk 13, in which Hashem says, Pasuk 13, a third of the way up on page 2, Vayom Hashem el Avraham, Lama zesach chasora. Why did Sarah laugh? Who is this Hashem who is speaking? Says the Rashbam, back to a third of the way up on page 3, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayom Hashem HaMalach. The Malach, God al-Shurahem, the greatest of the angels. So in the Rashbam's reading, the interweaving that's going on the whole time, in which we have guests, Hashem, and we look particularly at the confusion between Pasuk Yud Ches, Pasuk 18, verse 18, all the way through to verse 23, which that the guests get up, then Hashem speaks, then the guests leave, then Hashem speaks again. Says the Rashbam, all of this is resolved because all of this is one vision or one appearance of the Malachim speaking to Avraham. This is always the Malach speaking. So Pasuk Kaf, for example, Pasuk 20, Vayoma Hashem, the top of page 3, Za'aka Sodom Amorah Ki Rabbah, the cry of Sodom and Amorah is great, and therefore I'm going to destroy them. Who is this again who's speaking? This is the Malach. So this is a second reading in the Pasuk, that this is one story, one sequence. The revelation of Hashem is through the prophetic, through the experience of Avraham seeing Malachim, who then come and speak to him. And these Malachim, who are agents of Hashem, are sometimes described as God speaking to Avraham. The angel, the Malach, says to Avraham, you're going to have a child. The Malach then turns to Avraham and says, why does Sarah laugh? The Malach then turns to Avraham and says, I, speaking on behalf of Hashem, I'm going to destroy Sodom, etc. So this is a second reading in the Psukim. Remarkably, in a faraway land from North France, where the Rashbam lives, all the way in Egypt, a contemporary of the Rashbam, the Rambam, in his Moreh Nevuchim, in his Guide to the Perplexed, says a fairly similar idea, but takes it a step further. And the Rambam, in his Moreh Nevuchim, and I printed this as quoted by the Rambam, Nachmanides, at the top of page 4. So the Rambam, Nachmanides, at the top of, printed on the top of page 4, quotes the Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim. So we look at the top of page 4, VaYera Olav, the Sefer Moreh Nevuchim, in the Moreh Nevuchim. So now he's quoting the Guide to the Perplexed of the Rambam. He says, the Rambam says a shocking idea. The whole story, the whole chapter that we read, didn't happen in the real physical world. So he takes the Rashbam's idea that Hashem appears to Avraham, and that the figures that Avraham sees standing over him are angels, are the revelation of Hashem. He says the whole thing is a prophetic experience. The whole thing is what Avraham saw in his Nevuah. So what did Avraham see in his Nevuah? Hashem appeared to Avraham. Avraham is now in a prophetic state. The Rambam, by the way, is of the belief that when one is in a prophetic state, one's conscious mind is switched off, one is unaware of everything else, other than Moshe Rabbeinu, who was unique, that he was able to have prophecy whilst awake. Avraham is now in this trance-like or prophetic state. he now in his prophetic state experiences a story, like prophets often experience stories in their prophecy. And in this prophetic state, he sees three guests who are coming, and in his dream, his prophecy, he runs towards the guests and brings them in and does achnos and so on and so forth. So the Rambam is picking up on the Rashbam's point. Obviously, they're contemporaries. They've each thinking of this themselves. He's picking up really on Rashi's question. Rashi posed a question. It says Hashem appeared, and then we don't find Hashem saying anything, and suddenly Avraham goes out to greet the guests. Rashi says, you're correct. Avraham is in the middle of prophecy. He interrupts the prophecy to welcome in the guests, and we now end up with this sort of bifurcated story in which two things are going on, prophecy and welcoming guests in parallel. The Rashbam picks up on the same problem. Hashem appears, but he doesn't say anything. He says, you know what it means, says the Rashbam, when Hashem appears? It means Avraham saw angels. He saw three men approaching him. And the Rambam goes a stage further. When it says Hashem appeared, and it doesn't, this question, what then happened? What did Hashem say? The answer is Hashem appeared and gave Avraham a prophetic experience. And in the prophetic experience, he saw these three guests. In the prophetic experience, he is aware of them coming to visit him and delivering these messages. Why does the Rambam read the pasuk this way? Both because he sees this as pshat, as a reasonable reading, to resolve this question of what does the appearance of Hashem communicate beyond when nothing is said, and suddenly you find him running to entertain guests. And secondly, because of a philosophical point, the Rambam doesn't believe it is possible for angels, malachim, to adopt a physical body. They're not physical beings, they are spiritual beings. They are non-embodied consciousnesses. They are forces which can't be found in a body. And therefore, it's not possible for a malach to appear with a body. It's not possible, like Rashi says, that Avraham sees these angels and seems to experience them as physical beings and offers them food and thinks he's welcoming the guests. It's not even possible, like the Rashbam, that he sees a physical being, which is an angel, a message of Hashem. A physical being. A malach can't become a physical being. It isn't the sort of thing that can become a physical being. It's a spiritual entity. As soon as it's not the type of concept that can achieve a physical form. If I told you that a concept adopted a physical form, if I told you that the number 4 became purple today, or I asked you what is the taste of the number 17, or I told you that C minor appeared to me as a physical body. These concepts don't make sense. A musical note doesn't have a physical body. A number is a concept. It doesn't have a color or a shape. These are irreconcilable ideas. They don't go together. It's not possible for it to have a physical expression. Or other abstract identities. If a law of nature, if I told you a law of nature took on a physical form, it simply isn't possible to have that. And therefore the Rambam says this must have been a prophetic experience. Angels can't receive bodies. When it says that Avraham saw the angels and spoke to them, this is all part of a prophetic experience. The Rambam, by the way, says this on many other occasions. Whenever we find a prophetic encounter that looks physical, Rambam says, no, this can't have been physical, this is a prophecy. For example, when Avraham is described, when Yaakov is described as wrestling with an angel, the wrestling is a nevuah, prophetic experience, not a physical experience. Asks the Ramban on the Rambam many questions. He doesn't agree with the Rambam's theology over here. He doesn't agree that this is a reasonable reading of the Psukim, and he doesn't understand how this goes with the flow. Because if indeed this is a prophecy, and Avraham in his prophecy is welcoming in the guests and giving them food, at what point does the story end? We don't find anywhere the prophecy lifting. When the Malachim go off to Saddam, is that also part of the prophecy? When they speak to Saddam, is that too late? Is that also part of the prophecy? So he says there are textual difficulties in understanding the flow of the Psukim according to the Rambam. But this is, be that as it may, how Rambam Maimonides understood these Psukim. By the way, on another occasion, the Mefarshim asked on the Rambam, if this is a prophetic experience, how does it have a physical impact? If, according to the Rambam, for example, Yaakov's wrestling with the angels is a spiritual experience, a prophecy, why is that he emerges limping? And this remains somewhat of a puzzle in the view of the Rambam until we merited to the publication of the commentary of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, the Rambam's son, Rabbi Avraham, on the Torah. The background is as follows: the Rambam had one son only, Rabbi Avraham, who was a world-class scholar of considerable stature, but overshadowed by the reputation of his great father. And he wrote many important teshuvos, we found in the Cairo Geniza correspondence between him and people of his generation, in which one sees the reverence and awe with which he was held and his mastery of Torah. He also wrote an encyclopedic work of a mussar, of character development, based on the philosophy of his father and other philosophy, and expressing how in practice we can serve Hashem. He also wrote a commentary on the Torah. Unfortunately, he wrote in Arabic, and his works were not translated and were lost for many years. His mussar work has been, part of it was found and recently translated. When I say recently, I mean several decades ago. And similarly, his commentary on the Torah, part of it was found and has been translated. And it gives us unique insight into aspects of the Rambam's thought that we were unaware of previously. And he addresses this question. He says, why was Yaakov limping if he only experienced in a dream, in a prophecy, the encounter with the angel? And his answer is wonderful because it gives us illumination as to the thought of the Rambam. And he says, you're making a mistake. When the Rambam says it was a prophecy, he doesn't mean to say it wasn't real. He means to say it wasn't physical. But of course it was a real experience. Prophecy is real. Prophecy is a real encounter with spirituality. It's just not a physical encounter with spirituality. But Avraham really met Malachim. Yaakov really wrestled with an angel, but it was a spiritual wrestling, a prophetic wrestling, not a physical one. Don't relegate and debase the spiritual at the expense of the physical. Don't think that, the physical at the expense of the spiritual. Don't think that only physical events are real. Prophecy is also real, but it's just a prophetic experience. Says Rabbi Zobin, spiritual experiences can have an impact on our physical bodies. We all experience this. We maybe have a nightmare and you wake up in the morning and you're feeling tense. Maybe your back aches from the tension. Yaakov goes through a prophetic experience. In the prophetic experience, he is spiritually damaged by the angel such that he now physically limps. So this is the wonderful explanation of Rambam and Rambam, in which he explains to us that there can be physical manifestation of spiritual events that are experienced in prophecy. Be that as it may, this is the Rambam's reading of the Psukim. So we have now three interpretations. There's a fourth, Ibn Ezra, which I cut out because of the time that's available. But for now, three explanations of the Psukim and interweaving. Who is it that appears in front of Hashem? Appears in front of Avraham. Nothing further is said by Hashem. Then there's the welcoming of the guests. Then Hashem seems to appear as a character on and off through the story. Rashi says two parallel stories. Hashem is hanging around waiting on the one hand. On the other hand, the Malachim are being entertained and hosted beautifully by Avraham. The Rashbam says that the revelation, the divine revelation, is the experience of hosting these angelic figures, and the Rambam says the whole thing is a prophecy, to which the Ramban Nachmanides objects and says, I don't understand how you can read the Psukim this way. I want to conclude, though, with the wonderful and beautiful insight of Rabbi Shimon Shmuel Harsh. And when one reads his commentary, there are times in which one is just so uplifted by reading what he says, and one just is so deeply moved by the beauty of his ideas. And I really felt this when I read his commentary here on these Psukim printed at the bottom of page 4. And he wrote obviously in German. My German is not very good, but this is an English translation of it. I do have the English commentary at home, but on the computer form I got using Google Translate. So if it's slightly clumsy, please forgive me. I tried to edit it. But basically, this is what he says. He says, Hashem appeared to Avraham. He says, what's this unusual language? Hashem appeared to Avraham. Normally it says Hashem spoke to Avraham. Hashem doesn't mean he appeared to Avraham. It says Samson for Hashem, such beauty of thought and language. He says there's no place free from the divine presence, but not every person gets to see it. Only he who gives life to God, as Avraham did just now, gets to see the face of God, gets to see the face of Hashem. What a beautiful translation of the pasuk. Says Samson of Halacha, what's this sort of passive form of Hashem appeared to Avraham? Surely it should be active. Hashem revealed himself to Avraham. The answer is it's in the passive. Hashem appeared, he became visible to Avraham. Hashem is there everywhere. When does one become aware of Hashem? When does Hashem appear to us? When we're capable of seeing it. The broadcast goes out the whole time. The question is, do we have the receivers to pick up on the broadcast? Hashem appears to Avraham. Why? Because Avraham has just done a bris milah. He's just sacrificed Hashem. He's just done something wonderful and incredible. This is Avraham who's dedicated his life, sacrificed his life for the sake of Hashem and dedicated. Hashem appears to Avraham. In the passive sense, it's almost automatic. Hashem is everywhere. His presence is there. If only we opened our eyes to see it. If only we were of the stature to see it. Hashem appears to Avraham because Avraham is now able to perceive him. And then he carries on and he addresses the technicalities of the Psukim. He brings, and I'm not going to go through it now, the two ways of reading the Psukim. When in verse 3, Hashem says to Avraham says, to someone, please stand by. He brings the two commentaries. Either this is Avraham addressing Hashem, and when he says Adoi Noi, he means God, and he's saying to God, please stand by while I welcome my guests. Or it's Avraham speaking to his guests and referring to his guests with the title of covered gentlemen, please stay by, please enter into my house so that I can honor you and give you hospitality. And then he carries on and says, whatever the interpretation may be, it doesn't really make a difference in terms of the thought I now want to share, because we learn a great thing from here. God was revealed to Avraham as Avraham set out to perform the mitzvah of hospitality at the bottom of page 4. Such we are taught is the nature of prophecy in Israel. In other words, we ask the question, isn't this an unlucky coincidence, a poor choreography? Hashem appears to Avraham, and at the same time, he happens to send his angels as guests to Avraham. Says Rav Hirsch, when does prophecy appear? As per this story, as Avraham steps up to do Hachnos HaSorchim, as he steps up to welcome the guests. When does prophecy appear? Not when we are in some mystical meditative state. And he says really very beautifully, he says we're so used to he says there's such confusion around the Nevuah. He says we think that Nevuah is some form of mystical experience in which someone has to separate themselves and go and meditate and enter into a trance-like state. And when then the trance-like state with a mind emptied of everything else into the vacuum that's created in their mind, a spiritual appearance appears. People seek spirituality in psychedelic drugs, in LSD, in vehicles of emptying their minds, of removing themselves from physicality, and therefore learning to see the world in a mystical state, in a dreamlike, trance-like experience. He says this is exactly the opposite of what prophecy means to us. When is prophecy achieved? When we muck in, when we immerse ourselves into raw physicality, and in that raw physicality, we engage in mitzvah, in welcoming in these dusty guests who appear to be pagans, who appear to be of no worth. At that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed to Avraham. So he takes the Chazal who say, greater is welcoming guests more than receiving the divine, which in Rashi's reading we took to mean because Avraham interrupts in order to welcoming in the guests. In Samson Raphael Hirsch's reading, it's the welcoming of the guests that triggers the appearance of the divine. The cause and the effect, the greater closeness is achieved through the hospitality. The result of that is for an Avraham Avinu, then now Hashem appears to him, he becomes aware of the divine in his life. So this is Rabbi Hirsch's truly beautiful reading of the Pasuk. Hashem appears to Avraham because Avraham opens his eyes. He achieves prophecy because he becomes aware of the divine that's in the world. And what does he do to achieve that awareness? A life of sacrifice and dedication, yes, but culminating in an act of hospitality. That's the trigger of the prophecy, not the removing oneself from the world to enter into a trance-like state. So this concludes what I wanted to say on the Parsha. Normally I would now switch to Halacha, but I think I've been lucky that my voice has held up till now. So I'm going to stop at this point, even though we're only at the 3/4 of an hour point. And in Mitzvah Hashem, next week we will switch back to the normal format of half an hour Parsha, half an hour of Halacha, hopefully face-to-face again. And actually by next Wednesday I'll still be in my 10 days isolation, maybe, so I'll have to work out if that's possible or not. But either way, whether online or in face-to-face. And then hopefully we'll start the Melachas. My plan is to start the Melacha of Kosher, of tying knots on Shabbos. That will be our next Melacha that we will do. And I'm open after that to suggestions. We've spent quite a long time doing Hilchos Shabbos, to suggestions, and we did Hilchos Kashrus before that, suggestions of whether we should carry on with other Melachos of Shabbos or look at other halachic topics. But we will revert to our half an hour Halacha, half an hour Parsha format, please God, next week. In the meantime, thank you all so much for joining as always, and hopefully we'll be able to resume face-to-face next time. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.